This video assumes that you have already viewed the video on grouping by category. That video illustrates how, starting in Excel 2016, a date field is automatically grouped when it is placed in the rows or columns area. This video provides more details on grouping by dates. I will use the two daily revenue data sets you see here. The one on the left has a row for each date during a 3-year period. The second has the same data, but only for part of a single year. I have already created a pivot table for each of these data sets with sum of revenue in the values area, along with a pivot chart of the line type. I will first drag date to the rows area in the first pivot table. As you can see, the pivot table and pivot chart are not only grouped by year, but there are two new fields in the fields list and the rows area, years and quarters. These fields are not added to the data set. That is, there aren't new years and quarters columns in the data set, but they are added to the pivot cache, and these fields can be manipulated like any other fields. As an example, I will drag years to the columns area. Now there is a series in the chart for each year, where each series shows how revenue varied by quarter for a given year. As another example, I will switch the positions of quarters and years. Now there is a series for each quarter, where each series shows how revenue varied by year for a given quarter. Finally, I will place both years and quarters in the columns area. Or I will uncheck quarters in the fields list. Perhaps surprisingly, in both cases there is a series for each year, each showing monthly totals. Now I will move to the second pivot table. Remember that it is based on only part of a year. Again, I will drag date to the rows area. For reasons I don't totally understand, the only new field added here is months, not quarters or years. Evidently, Excel has built-in rules for how to group on dates, depending on the specific range of dates in the data source. If I drag months to the columns area, I see a very busy pivot chart showing revenue by day. I will drag months back to the rows area. You can still override Excel's automatic grouping in the usual grouping dialog box. However, as you can see, there is no option for grouping by week. I can accomplish the same thing by grouping on days and selecting 7 as the number of days. Then the first week will start on the first day in the data set, which happens to be a Friday. So each week will extend from Friday to the following Thursday. If I want each week to start on a Monday, for example, I can change the starting date to be the previous Monday, January 28th. Here is the resulting line chart of weekly totals. So keep these grouping options in mind, and don't be afraid to experiment. Some of the most insightful pivot table reports break down data by a date field, so it helps to have as many date options as possible.